Hello and welcome to the In-Depth Genealogist Chit Chat Live for the week of May 14th, 2017. Welcome everyone. I'm Valerie Eichler, Lair, your host for the IDG Chit Chat Live. And I'm so excited because I get to interview one-on-one with our newest writer for the Going In-Depth Magazine, Lara Diamond. Hi, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here.
Did I pronounce your name right?
You did. Thank you.
Oh, good. The only way I can remember it is because my last name is Lair, and I just add the ah.
That works.
Good, good. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks. And you?
Good, good. How's everything in Baltimore, Maryland?
We finally hit summer. So we've gone from last week with winter coats, and this week I have the air conditioning on.
Oh, my gosh. Kind of sounds like here in the past couple of weeks. So.
Yeah.
Well, good. I know I'm glad it's summer, and it's a great time to get out and do genealogy that you can't do when, when there's 5 feet of snow outside. So
yeah.
I have a few questions for you for today's Chit Chat Live. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first one is, of course, we always ask this question is, how long have you been doing genealogy?
I started when I was in middle school. Couple things happened. I read Roots by Alex Haley, and I was like, this was pretty cool. I should be able to do this too. My dad took me to a cousin's house who showed me a family tree he had done on long dot matrix printer, tracing my great-great-grandfather who had 3 wives and 12 children and tracing his descendants. So I took that and ran with it, and I haven't really stopped since. Because I started so young, my poor mother had to drive me to the National Archives and to the Family History Center, and she'd sit in a corner with a book while I would go through microfilms for hours.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, usually it's the other way around. We drag our kids. That's awesome. That's great that you started, at a young age, and look what you had to start with.
Oh yeah, and I was able to interview all of my grandparents at that time, and I videotaped it. So I recently digitized those videotapes and rewatched them and gotten more nuggets of information. And I wrote letters to cousins all across the country, and I still have those letters to pull together bits and pieces of the family. So that was kind of where I was able to start from and build from there.
You were really lucky to have, because some people have nothing to start with, really.
Right,
so exactly. What got you interested in doing Jewish research?
Well, my family is Jewish on all sides, so it kind of fell in. It was kind of natural. So I started doing my family, which was Jewish research, and it kind of became a nice niche.
Mm-hmm. Did it take you, throwing an extra question in here, did it take you very long to catch on to it since you started young?
I've learned more and more, and I had to go back and question a lot of the things that I did when I was 14 and 15. I made some assumptions that maybe I shouldn't have. When I was about 16, I found what's called a Yisker book, which is a memorial book that people wrote to their towns after the Holocaust. And in a Yisker book about one of the areas that my mother's family came from, my great-great-grandfather's name was mentioned. I got really excited. I wrote to the publisher of the book in Israel, who told me the name of the guy who wrote this, who wrote back to me and gave me the ancestors of this great-great-grandfather of mine. And only about 3 years ago, when I actually got the records from the town, it turns out there were 2 men with the exact same name in the town, one of which was his grandfather and one of which was my great-great-grandfather. So, starting young, I was just kind of, not questioning and taking things. Now I've gone back and kind of validated a lot of the research I did early on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which you don't have to be young to have made that kind of beginner error where,
That's true.
Because there's so many things that, when people who start, when they were older,
mm-hmm.
that, the same thing.
Yeah, but now it's so much easier with clicking through those ancestry leaves and believing everything they say. Yeah, it's kind of more of a rookie mistake rather than a young age mistake.
That leads to another extra question. Is everything online?
No. And when you're doing Jewish genealogy, nothing's online. or close to nothing. I've had to deal with a lot of Eastern European archives where little to nothing is online at all. So people who are whose families have been in America for generations are fortunate. Not even everything in the US is online, but at least there's a lot that's out there and it gives you a good start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're having this chat because you are a new writer, author for the Indepth Genealogist Going Indepth Magazine, digital magazine. And so I'm dying to find out and let our viewers know, when is the first issue that your article comes out, your first article?
I believe it's going to be in the July issue. It's going to be about Jewish cemeteries, gravestones, and other kind of death-related things that are specific to Jewish genealogy that can really help you to trace your family.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, in teaching beginners and so forth, I always say, you know, you work from the known to the unknown backwards in time. And usually that means you start with death records or death, like tombstones and so forth. So you recommend the same thing for Jewish research, right?
Oh, definitely. And one bonus of Jewish tombstones is that 99% of them that are more than 30, 40 years old not only have the name of the deceased, but also have the name of the deceased's father on the tombstone. Sometimes if the person was an immigrant, it will give the name of the town the person was from. And it's giving the person's Hebrew name, which is generally the name, if this is your immigrant ancestor, it's the name that they migrated over with. They didn't come over as Morris. They came over as Moshe or Meir or Mordechai, one of those names. And you need to know what name that is to be able to trace people back to Europe. So just one little tombstone can give you that huge clue.
Oh my gosh. We need to go and inscribe all this stuff on our American, yep. German, you know, tombstones. It's like, really, you know, yep. What a wonderful find. And you mentioned that it's not, you know, it's not Morris. So let's say the surname, I'm throwing out another extra question, is surname of Koenig, Koenig.
Yep.
Is that a Jewish name or was that Americanized?
It could be a German Jewish name. It means king. It's a name that could be Jewish, but it also isn't. A lot of surnames aren't specifically Jewish. They're you can't look at a surname and say Jewish family. You have to look at other indications to know that they're Jewish. But Koenig definitely could be a Jewish family, mm-hmm. and it could be their original name from Europe.
Well, the clue for me is in the census that said, you know, Jewish, and they referenced Ashkenazi.
Really, in the census?
Yeah.
Wow, that's unusual.
I was shocked.
I've seen hundreds of Jewish censuses. I've never seen Ashkenazi. I've seen Jewish many times. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So the first issue of the Going Indepth digital magazine is in July, and you're going to talk about, you know, death records and tombstones. And pardon me if I'm repeating this, but it's also going taking it from America, hopefully, to go back.
Right.
To you. Okay. Good.
Exactly.
Good. Oh, I can't wait for that issue to come out. So remember that, everybody, July, July, watch. Okay. One question I had planned to ask you is, what 3 tips do you have for people who are just getting started doing Jewish research?
Yeah. Like any research, you want to start with what you know and work your way back generation by generation. With Jewish genealogy specifically, jewishgen.org is a wonderful resource. It's a free site. You have to sign up with for a free account, but there's a lot of both Jewish 101, Jewish genealogy 101 type tutorials on there. There's also record sets. There's a lot of indexing projects of Jewish records going on that are searchable through JewishGen. I coordinate a couple of those. So there's a lot, you know, more and more information is coming on there all the time. There's also some really great Facebook groups that specialize in Jewish genealogy. Tracing the Tribe is one. Jewish Genealogy Portal is another. They're all groups that, you know, people just willingly answer people's questions. You have people who just found out they were part Jewish. You have people who have been researching for a long time, and all sorts of great conversations going on. And even just reading other people's questions, it's a really great place to learn what to look for, what to do.
Especially when someone's first starting out, they may not feel comfortable to ask a question.
Yeah, but just lurking in a group, you can really learn a lot.
So that's Jewish Gen. Can you spell that?
Jewishgen, Jewish Genealogy, jewishgen.org. Great site. For a beginner, I'd also suggest just looking, generally if somebody's family's been in America for a couple of generations, starting out with Ancestry or Family Search, you can trace your family back with census records and Chit manifests, and all of those things are available. And so they're a really great way to kind of build out your knowledge of your family in the U.S. to help you to go back to where they came from in Europe and have be tracing the right family in the right place when you get over there.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask besides the tips, and that's what I heard, 2 really good tips. And well, actually 3. The first one is start with what you know. And if that's only, say, your parents' names and maybe the grandparents on your mom's side, but not your dad, again, working the census.
Yep. And just start back. And there's so much information in the U.S. especially for families that have been here for a couple generations, that you can really get not just names and dates, but a robust understanding of the types of lives that people led. There's a lot of Jewish newspapers that were published in cities, and a lot of them are coming online now. So being able to read stories about what your ancestors did, and sometimes mentioning where they came from in Europe, you can really understand them. I found a reference to my grandfather in the Pittsburgh Jewish Criterion, I think, when he got engaged to my grandmother. Apparently he was called Toll Bridge Tolchin because he ran through, he sped so fast, he pretty much passed by all the toll booths.
My gosh.
Yeah. So lots of interesting information. I knew my grandfather. He only passed away about 6 years ago. I knew him when he was older. He was a more sedate driver, but I guess in his younger years he wasn't.
Oh, that's a great story. That's good. Good oral history that you actually personally witnessed.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Okay, so my next question was, what are the best or the best resource? And you mentioned one just now with newspapers and Jewish newspapers.
Yeah.
How do people find that out? Say like this Koenig that I'm researching was in New York.
Okay, so in New York, so there's actually a couple of them are available, I think, on Fulton History website. But the Center for Jewish History in Manhattan has a lot of old Jewish newspapers. The New York Public Library actually has a Jewish genealogy section. It's called Dorot, which means generations in Hebrew. It's in the big, I think, Fifth Avenue, the big library with the lions. And they have a lot of old newspapers, not just from New York, but across the country, that are on microfilm. And so you can go through a lot of those. Some cities are online. I've dealt with a lot with Pittsburgh. There were a couple of the Ohio towns, and I'm trying to remember, I think it might have been Cincinnati or Cleveland, that has their Jewish newspaper online. But you can also go to Jewish museums or Jewish historical societies in particular towns, because they'll, even if it's not online, they'll at least have hard copy versions that you can go through. I've done that in the basement of the Jewish Museum in Maryland, going through 100-year-old issues of the Baltimore Jewish Times.
Mm-hmm. Great. What about, say, New Jersey?
Off the top
Same
of my
thing?
head, I would go to the local historical societies. Yeah, I don't, I haven't done a lot with New Jersey newspapers, so.
Okay. I'm sorry, I kind of put you on the spot there.
No, that's
but
fine.
It's like you throw out different states, but it's basically the same methodology.
Exactly. A lot of places that had Jewish communities had Jewish newspapers. Sometimes the early ones were in Yiddish because that's what the immigrants read, but they changed to English a generation or so in. And you can find out so much information because it was really a way to kind of spread the gossip about the Jewish community around. So you can find lots of interesting things in these newspapers.
Can you, another best resource, would that be like the synagogues? It's synagogues, right?
Yep. So
Okay.
it depends. Some synagogue records can be wonderful. I have a friend who is now working full time on going through the synagogue records from the Homestead Hebrew congregation from Homestead, Pennsylvania, outside Pittsburgh. And she is pulling together an incredible amount of work. Homesteadhebrews.org. She's just pulling all this together. Some synagogue records are still in the synagogues if they're still around. Sometimes synagogues were kind of merged, and you can find records there. Sometimes they're in Jewish historical societies or Jewish museums. I was able to find in the Jewish Museum in Maryland my great-great-grandfather, and every time he had an honor in the synagogue, you're supposed to pledge money to the synagogue in charity. And he wasn't so good with paying his bills sometimes. And so I was able to see that. You could see every time he got an honorary, it was like 50 cents adding up, but it had his signature on it and all kinds of great and wonderful information.
Oh, that's awesome. That gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, it was incredible.
People ask me, all the time, you're all excited over your own ancestors, but it's like you get the same excitement when there's somebody else. I said, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like seeing somebody finally got through the brick wall or figured something out. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a client, and unfortunately, the person hasn't renewed, for the next contracted time period. I'm waiting, and I know this person would be a long-term client, and so I wasn't too concerned when there wasn't an immediate renewal. And so I keep waiting for the renewal, and I need to reach out to this person because I'm ready. I've done a little bit of investigative research, on the Jewish side of it, and gathered some websites and so forth. And you've mentioned those already. But when it comes time to actually getting in there, and I get stuck because even though I'm a professional genealogist, you can't know everything about everything. And so how would I go about, or how would other professional genealogists go about subcontracting for you?
I've done this before. We'll talk through kind of the scope of, what people want and, which, how much research has already been done. One of the critical things with tracing Jewish families back to Europe is knowing the precise town. So if the precise town of origin is already known, that's going to be a lot less work. If I need to figure that out, it'll kind of factor in. And sometimes I'll subcontract, or I guess subcontract to somebody, a local person who I've dealt with before, who can go to the archives. Because like we said before, a lot of these records simply aren't online. And so unless somebody wants to fly me to Eastern Europe, I have people who will go for me and get records there. But again,
that's great.
Really, yeah, it really comes back to knowing the town just because of how the record sets are organized there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good to know, because so many times even professional genealogists get stuck. You need a team. It takes a team to build a city. And so it's good to know that you allow or accept subcontracting. Let's take it on the other side of the coin. What if someone contacts you? Can they contact you directly, and how would they do that, and how do you work that?
Yeah, my email address is laradiamond@gmail.com.
Can you spell that?
LARADIAMOND@gmail.com. And we'll kind of talk through the scope of the project, figure out kind of a ballpark number of hours at least to start, and kind of see where things go from there. It really depends on the scope, if we're looking at one line, multiple lines, and again, how much information they already have.
And how do you handle those that say, well, I want to know it all, or I want everything? Do you kind of drill them down to be more specific? And
yeah, I kind of say, okay, well, let's set something to start. We set a goal, work on researching towards that. I send them that information, and then I say, okay, do we want to go further? you know, obviously we could keep going, but, you know, people's funds aren't unlimited. So most people, you know, can kind of work with me to kind of scope what they really, what they want within whatever their budget allows for.
And you kind of point to, well, I would recommend that we do this rather than say something that they're, you know, suggesting.
It depends. If they're really set on something, then we can go for that. But I'll often, you know, kind of clue them into, hey, you know, if you have this kind of information, we could do this over here. You know, we could work towards this, and, you know, here's what would be involved. And sometimes they want to go that direction, and sometimes they're really set on what they want, and they're the customer, so that's what we do.
Great. Well, that's good to know. So subcontracting for professionals and direct contact with anyone that needs assistance. Do you also do, say, consultations where they want to try and do the research, just, you know, need to know where or how?
Yep, I do that. I also actually work through genealogy.coach and doing that kind of thing. So it's a really great way for somebody to get just a little bit of my time and, you know, just kind of the nudge that they need to figure out where they need to go to get through the brick wall that's holding them back.
Yeah, I love consultations or coaching where I may not be able to do the research for them because of my, you know, work schedule, you know, with other clients or so forth. But if they're willing to, you know, take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour or whatever consultation, then they can go out and have the fun too. So
Exactly.
That's good to know that you do, you know, pretty much all aspects of it. Great.
Yeah.
Well, we have about, I'm not the dictator. I let my timer do that. But we have about 8 minutes. So I wanted to let you just talk about your personal research. You know, you started so young and you had, you know, the wonderful lineage kind of laid out on that dot matrix printer.
Yeah.
And, you know, but where's some of the areas, you know, to talk, maybe tell us how, you know, is it Ashkenazi, you know what? So you have the floor. Just.
Okay. Yep. So my family is all Ashkenazi Jewish, which basically means from Eastern Europe. When my family came to America, I had branches that came from Poland, the Russian Empire, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. Currently, they're all in Ukraine because the borders have changed. So, and it's actually, I was in Ukraine a couple months back, and, you know, people still remember my family there, which was incredible. And just being able to go through the villages and go to the archives there in person was a once in a lifetime experience, although I might do it again because there's more I want to do. But my research, so it's mostly in modern day Ukraine. So the records are in Russian and some in Hebrew. The ones that came from Subcarpathian Ukraine are mostly in Hungarian and Czech, depending on the year and where the border was that particular minute. But I've been getting, I've been able, people say all the records were destroyed. That's why Jewish genealogy is so difficult. It's not true. Some records were destroyed, but there's a lot that's still out there, and it just isn't online. So if you do an ancestry search, you're not going to find them, but they're there, and they're just waiting for people to come and discover them. So I do a lot of coordination of getting records for towns and areas and indexing them so that everybody can see them. So I work a lot with Jewish Gen and getting these records online.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. And to think, you know, where you've had to get into the different areas because of the border changes. So you've had to probably work with maps or know the history of and where.
Yeah.
So I hope that one of your future articles in Going in Depth is, you know, maybe, you know, talk about if one or two of the areas and what you had to do.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I might have an idea for my second article now.
There you go. See, I love to talk about things, but the minute I have to write, it's like I freeze.
See, I love writing. I have a blog, and everything that's happening in my research ends up on my blog. So it's the way.
What's your blog address then?
My blog is larasgenealogy.blogspot.com, LARAS genealogy.blogspot.com. And I call it Lara's genealogy because it's Jewish genealogy. But yeah. And so what I started it kind of as a way for me to document it and kind of share with my relatives who don't care about my research but are willing to read like one article and find that cool. But it's ended up a way for me to think through my thought processes. And sometimes as I'm writing up a problem or I might come up with a new idea that I didn't when I was just going through the research otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, I love to write, as obviously, especially for my own research and for my clients' research. It's putting it out there to the masses that but I know I've heard others like Tom Jones and even Elizabeth Shown Mills, and it's like, they're nervous too? Really? So, okay. But I think, writing it out, and that's what we all have to do. We all should do.
Yeah.
And it's not just for that we do that for our clients, but we do that for ourselves, our own research.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I still continue to make breakthroughs. I just last week had a huge breakthrough for my biggest brick wall, and it's actually relatively close. We knew my grandfather had an uncle, Uncle Labish, and my father remembers meeting this Uncle Labish when he was really young. Nobody knew what happened to the man. And I assumed he became Lewis Diamond, which was a common English version of Labish. And you know how many Lewis Diamonds there are? I went through, I don't even know how many naturalization people, just trying to find somebody who matched up with him. Finally found him last week, got in touch with his grandson, who lives in California and is really excited. And he had some of the same family stories that we did. So and now I'm confident it's the right guy. And I'm actually going to be at a jamboree next month, and we're going to meet up.
Awesome.
My second cousin once removed, so it's actually really close. And somehow 2 branches of the family lost touch.
Oh my gosh. We'll do the happy dance for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm still excited.
That is exciting. It is. And how you were explaining it, we have a couple minutes, but doing DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're Jewish, DNA is a lot more complicated than for the typical person. That's because Jews are what's called endogamous, which basically means small set of ancestors whose descendants all married one another. So I'm actually giving a talk at Jamboree about this because it makes life a lot more frustrating. I have on Ancestry, I have something like 4,000 predicted fourth cousins and closer. I don't have 4,000 fourth cousins and closer, let alone 4,000 who have tested. But because I'm probably 10th cousins in 15 ways with them, and we share a lot of DNA, and so the algorithms think that we're a lot more closely related than we are. However, I did have one huge DNA. I have had DNA successes, which is what I try to tell people. It's harder, but it's possible. I actually reconnected. My grandfather had an aunt that we thought was killed in the Holocaust. I matched her great-grandson. She was living in Detroit. She had 6 kids. She has a whole bunch of grandkids, great-grandkids, had no clue. And we're back in touch after, 60, 70 years, thanks to DNA. Never would have even thought to research that branch because we thought Aunt Shandel was killed. Mm-hmm. But
goosebumps doubled.
Yeah. So yeah, DNA, I am a big fan. I may or may not administer over 50 kits because especially when you have Jewish DNA, you need all of those different insights from different branches of your family to really get an understanding of how people might be related. And sometimes they can be related in many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations on all sides and all happy dances. We've got about 1 more minute. If you want to take a few seconds to just kind of wrap things up, one final thought. And
yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to start working with the Indepth Genealogist, and yeah, look forward to sharing the wonderful things you can do with genealogy, with Jewish genealogy, out with others.
Well, I am so excited that you're on the Going Indepth magazine team, and we're going to have such a great time having the Jewish, column and having an expert to share ideas and tips and about your own research, and because it's amazing how much you can learn from someone else's research. Obviously, it may not have anything to do with you, but you follow the same type of methodology.
Exactly.
And so, yeah. Well, welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being on my first Chit Chat Live in meeting the authors. I really appreciate that. And will you come back and join us again sometime?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay. If you said no, that was not going to be the right answer.
Of course, I would love to.
Yeah. I didn't pay her, folks. No. Well, thank you so much, Lara. See,
Thank you.
I knew I did it twice. Lara, thank you so much. And as we bid a fond farewell to everyone, remember to go in depth with all of your ancestors. Bye-bye.